Each step I took in the dark forest felt like an insurmountable challenge. The rustling of leaves beneath my feet sounded like thousands of whispers, beckoning me deeper into the darkness. Moonlight penetrated through the dense foliage, casting eerie shadows on the ground, like a puppet theater where each player was summoned to their role in this nocturnal drama. I continued on my path, trying not to think about what might be lurking in this forest. In my mind echoed the voices of explorers from books and movies I had read and watched in childhood. They told stories of mysterious creatures dwelling in the depths of the forest, about which no one knew anything, but I suppressed my fears, convincing myself that they were just fantasies. However, my confidence began to falter when I heard that sound. It was a sound of incredible power, like the voice of the forest itself, awakening from slumber. It was a roar that had nothing to do with any known beasts. It sounded deeper, more powerful, as if calling to something indescribable and dangerous. I slowed my pace, listening intently to the sound. It came from afar, but its power made me tremble with fear. My thoughts raced in all directions, trying to find an explanation for this inexplicable sound, but to no avail. Finally, I decided to continue my journey, brushing off the strange sounds as if they were of no importance. I quickened my pace, eager to pass through this forest as quickly as possible and find shelter from this ominous darkness. But the forest wouldn't let me go so easily. Its trees stood like guards, blocking my path, and its sounds and rustles surrounded me from all sides, as if they were living creatures, ready to attack at any moment. When night finally fell, I was exhausted and weary. The forest became even more ominous and menacing. Its trees seemed like monstrous beings ready to pounce on me and swallow me whole. I found a place to camp, a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. I pitched my tent and settled in, but even inside I felt the forest watching me, waiting for the moment when I would let my guard down and become its next victim. Gradually, darkness enveloped the forest, and the sounds of its life became even louder and more intense. Rustles and whispers filled the air, like ghosts wandering among the trees, searching for their next victim. I sat in my tent, clutching my flashlight, trying to convince myself that it was all just my imagination. But I didn't even believe myself. Something was wrong in this forest, and I felt it to the very depths of my soul. When midnight finally came, I couldn't sleep. My nerves were on edge, and every sound, every rustle made me tremble with fear. And then I heard it again, that roar that seemed to pierce me through, making my hair stand on end with terror. I jumped up, my heart pounding so hard that I could feel it in my ears. I knew I had to find out what was happening, despite all my fears. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the tent, ready to face something that might surpass even my worst nightmares. But what I saw was even more terrifying than I could have imagined. In the bushes, not far from my camp, something was moving. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the dark spot amidst the green foliage, trying to make out what was there. And then the creature emerged from behind the bushes. It was a creature from my darkest nightmares, something I couldn't even imagine in my worst dreams. It resembled a wolf, but its body was twisted, its eyes gleamed with sinister light, and its teeth were sharp as razors. Fear paralyzed me. I couldn't move as the creature approached, standing on two legs. Its roar pierced my soul, and I realized it was the end. I closed my eyes, expecting the blow to come, but it never did. When I opened my eyes, the creature was gone, and around me was only the dark forest where I had become lost, and the unknown fear that filled my heart. I realized it was just the beginning of the nightmare that awaited me in this cursed forest. The sun warmed our backs like a gentle touch of a mother as we, three madmen, cut through the dense forest thickets, consumed by the thirst for adventure. With every step, with every rustle of leaves beneath our feet, our excitement only grew. We, like three daredevils, were full of determination to delve into the depths of this dark world, where it seemed that every tree held its secrets and every stone hid a mystery. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Jake asked, slowing his pace and looking around with some concern. "Of course it's a great idea," I replied, smiling and adjusting our map. "The forest is a place where adventures await around every turn. We've just found the key to great discoveries." Tim, our third companion, just snorted in response, shaking his head and turning his gaze back to the forefront. And so, we continued our journey, forgetting about time and the world beyond the green, lush trees. Every new turn, every mysterious whisper of the wind, every unexpected movement hidden in the bushes only fueled our excitement. We were alive, we were free, and we were ready for anything. But like all good things, the sun couldn't last forever, and as its rays began to fade behind the horizon, replacing the daytime light with the cold shadow, our confidence began to wane. "Hey, are you sure we're going the right way?" Tim stopped and looked at me with concern in his eyes. "Of course we're going the right way," I nodded affirmatively. "We're following this map, and it will lead us to the exit." But even as I said it, there was a hint of doubt in my voice. We continued to move forward, but my inner compass began to spin anxiously, as if losing orientation in this maze of trees. Then, as if the forest itself wanted to test us, we found that instead of getting closer to the exit, we were going in circles. At some point, my friends noticed this, and their faces began to reflect the same panic that trembled in my chest. "Something's wrong," Jake whispered, his voice sounding alarmed. "We're going in circles, I'm sure of it." "That can't be," I tried to convince myself and my friends. "We just got a little lost. We can find our way back." But as convincing as my words sounded, with each step, it became harder for me to ignore the feeling that the forest was playing with us like puppets on strings. Finally, when darkness enveloped us with its darkness, I realized that we had to find shelter before the full darkness engulfed us. And then, as if answering my prayers, we saw the cabin. The light from its windows seemed like a beacon in the darkness, calling us to salvation. We rushed towards it, like drowning men to a straw, hoping to find refuge from this nightmare night. But when we entered inside, our relief was short-lived. A sinister atmosphere enveloped us like a cold fog, making the hairs on our necks stand on end. Everything in this cabin seemed so unnatural and alien. The fire in the fireplace, which was supposed to bring warmth, breathed with the heat of anxiety. The skins of wild animals hanging on the walls seemed no less terrifying than the darkest storm clouds. And then, as if from the shadows, the old man rose. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, and his face was distorted by a grimace of horror. "Welcome, my little aliens," he croaked, his voice sounding like a whisper of curses. "You're lost in my forest, and now you're mine." My heart froze in my chest as I realized the true meaning of his words. This cabin, these woods, they were his hiding place, his lair, his world, and we had walked straight into his web. But I refused to give up. I refused to become his victim. Even as fear gripped my throat, I refused to let him win. "We have to get out of here," I said, trying to suppress the tremor in my voice. "We have to find a way to freedom." But when I turned to convince my friends, I saw that they were already frozen in place, as if petrified with fear. And the old man, laughing with cruel laughter, drew his axe. "No," I shouted, lunging forward to protect my friends. But the old man was fast, too fast for me. His hand flashed, and the axe whistled in the air, slicing through a piece of darkness. Pain pierced my body as he struck me, and I almost lost consciousness from this agony. But when I opened my eyes, all I saw was fear and horror, blurred by tears in my eyes. My friends lay unconscious before me, and the old man, laughing with a horrible cruelty, was already coming after me. My mind screamed at me to run, to save myself, to survive. And I listened to that scream. I ran as if the devil himself were chasing me. My legs were heavy as lead, but I didn't stop. I ran to survive, to stay alive in this forest of horrors, on this night of nightmares. And I knew that nothing and no one would stop me until I found a way to freedom. That's how our night in the forest ended, my night of nightmares. And even when I returned to civilization, when I left those dark trees behind and forgot about that old man in his cabin, in my dreams I still saw his face, still heard his sinister laughter, still felt the cold of his threat. And it seemed to me that that forest, that night, that fear, they all stayed with me, like a shadow that never left me. Twilight had always cast a special allure over the forest. It was during one such twilight that my grandfather and I embarked on our journey into the woods, with the dual purpose of gathering mushrooms and fishing by the lake. The world around us seemed imbued with mysteries and promises, as leaves rustled beneath our feet and sunbeams filtered through the dense canopy, painting playful patterns on the forest floor. This day held a particular significance for me, as it always did. Equipped with baskets for mushrooms, fishing rods, provisions, and camping gear, we set out in the morning, relishing the crispness of the air and the rich scents of the forest. My grandfather, a seasoned woodsman, instilled in me a sense of security, and I eagerly anticipated the adventures that lay ahead. Our journey to the river was punctuated by numerous stops to collect various mushrooms and berries, each new discovery filling me with delight. The diversity of fungi found in the forest never ceased to amaze me, and I eagerly anticipated the prospect of feasting on a dinner comprised of freshly foraged forest delicacies. However, as we neared the lake, a subtle shift in the atmosphere became palpable. The air grew tense, as if we had crossed into a realm beyond the ordinary. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with this particular place. Though my grandfather seemed unperturbed, his attention focused on finding prime fishing spots. Setting up camp on the lake's shore, we commenced our preparations for dinner. While my grandfather cast his line into the water, I busied myself gathering firewood for the impending campfire. At that moment, it seemed as though nothing could mar the tranquility of our surroundings. Yet, as the sun began its descent beneath the horizon, an unsettling change began to take hold. The shadow cast by the lake deepened, and an inexplicable tension permeated the air. Unease gnawed at me, and I entertained fleeting thoughts of abandoning our venture and returning home. Then, inexplicably, the water of the lake began to stir, as though roused from a deep slumber. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I watched, transfixed, the surface of the lake roil with unseen movement. And then they emerged. At first, they appeared as mere shadows beneath the water's surface, but gradually they ascended, revealing themselves to be creatures unlike any I had encountered before. Resembling humans, yet with skin adorned in scales and eyes that gleamed in the gathering darkness, they exuded an aura of otherworldly menace. My grandfather and I stood rooted to the spot, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before us. I could feel the pounding of his heart, mirroring the frantic rhythm of my own. Yet, in the face of these enigmatic beings, we were but two solitary figures, woefully unequipped to confront the unknown. As one of the creatures drew nearer, I felt my grandfather's grip tighten around my hand. His eyes betrayed a mixture of resolve and trepidation, a silent acknowledgement of the peril that loomed before us. We stood on the precipice of an abyss, teetering on the brink of uncertainty. Then, in an instant, chaos erupted. A guttural scream tore through the air, wrenching me from my reverie. I turned to see my grandfather locked in a desperate struggle with one of the creatures, his valiant efforts to fend it off proving futile against its superior strength. I longed to rush to his aid, to intervene in the unfolding tragedy, but a paralyzing fear rooted me to the spot. I was a mere spectator, rendered impotent by the magnitude of the horror unfolding before me. When I regained my senses, it was too late. The creatures vanished beneath the murky depths of the lake, leaving behind only ripples on the water's surface, and my grandfather, he was gone, swallowed up by the darkness, his fate sealed by forces beyond our comprehension. Frantic and desperate, I searched the shoreline, calling out his name into the encroaching night. But my cries were met with silence, the echoes of my despair reverberating through the empty expanse of the forest. Returning to our camp, I found myself alone with my harrowing truth. No one would believe the tale I had to tell, dismissing it as the fanciful imaginings of a frightened child. But for me, it was a stark reality, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the unfathomable depths of the unknown. Each time I recall that fateful day, I am consumed anew by a potent cocktail of fear and grief. The memory of my grandfather's disappearance lingers like a specter, a chilling testament to the mysteries that lurk within the heart of the forest.